but I want to check which one you want to start with for reviewing tissue. I see somebody using chat, so I better open that up. Okay. Oh. So far we have a 1, 2, we have 4 for Kahoots and 5 for whiteboard so far. I still need to see Jonathan, Dorothy, and Emily. Let's hear the, oh, you're the ones, some of you are the ones that use the chat box. Good, I see Dorothy's vote. Oh, no, she changed her vote. I'm very confused. Okay. All right, so yeah, you can do the Kahoot anytime. The link is public, which means people can practice them anytime. And what I did with last 2 periods was I read it so people could do it in the chat box if they were having troubles doing it on the computer. So we will just start on the whiteboard. That way you can kind of have it fresh in your brain before I look at it more like a quiz or a test on the Kahoot. And your Kahoot is just based on doing it, not the score that you get on it. I just want to see how we're doing on tissue. We have 2 more people coming in and then we will get started. Except for I lost my participants list. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go to your PowerPoint. This is also attached to today's stream, and it's on Week at a Glance. But just to remind you of what we've covered and what we still have to do and where we left off. So what we've covered are being able to list the major tissue types and know kind of the basics about them, their functions, their locations, and characteristics. And then we looked at specifically at epithelial tissue and the types of that, but I said the only 2 you have to know is squamous being flat and stratified being layered, those 2 kind of types and shapes. And then we left off on glands, because glands come out of epithelial tissue, either secreting inside or outside the body. And so after that, though, 5-3 is all about connective tissue. So then we'll specialize, instead of epithelial tissue, we'll look at connective tissue. 5-4 is completely bonus. So I'm not going to spend any time on 4 major types of membranes. But I am going to do the 3 types of muscle tissues and the nervous tissue. So looks like we have most people here now. So the first thing is on your whiteboard, can you name all of 4 tissue types? You can do the abbreviations I talked about last time, since this is one we've done multiple times now. So what on your whiteboard are the 4 tissue types? Good, Yvonne. There we go. Maggie, nice. Dorothy, good. Still waiting for a couple of you. Don't forget that once you write it, you have to press enter so I can see it. Sarah, good. Okay, that's visible. Angela, good start. Still waiting on a couple of you. Kaya, there you go. Nate, you out there? Dion, good. Okay. All right, so don't forget that on some of these, we're going to use these particular types of terms all year long, so you can write just ET, CT, MT, and NT for each of them, especially connective tissue, which is one that we see for every organ system we're going to talk about. So epithelial tissue, that connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue are the ones that we, the first part that we started. And then you have all these study slides to look at what level you're at. Then go ahead and add to your slide 3 characteristics of epithelial tissue. So what were 3 kind of distinguishing features that we'd see if we were looking at a slide of epithelial tissue compared to the other 3? So what are things about it that make it different than muscle, nervous, or connective? Good, I see Maddie writing about having a surface, right? That bare apical freeze, nothing's there, and then all of a sudden you have tissue there. Good, it's covering things. So Angela's got that. So it's covering the outside of your body as well as organs and lining anything that's hollow. Good, tightly packed. So you have these cells. It's highly cellular that are tightly packed together in layers. That was Michaelin. Good. Good. Kaya has covers and lines bodies and organs. The cells all have these different shapes. Yes, attached to this membrane that's what's called basement or basal at the bottom before it gets into connective tissue. Divides easily. Yes, that's a good one. Sarah has the divide easily. So they undergo mitosis. Some other tissues that will look like are cells that are mature and they're trapped. They're done. They're not going to divide or make new. And so if you injure them and they can't do mitosis, they can't get better. So like neurons, although there's lots of research and debate about that right now, about it, whether your neurons can replace themselves if they get damaged. But it's important for certain cells. And if you damage like the cartilage, if you've ever seen people with cauliflower ear from being boxed and hit over and over, those cells don't repair themselves because they're not making stem cells all the time. And unlike your skin, that when you scratch it and it can heal, other cells don't do that. So that cell division is important as we get into other tissue types and in cancer. All right, so widespread throughout the body, covers your organs, body. So you guys had that. I saw the free surface. I saw anchored to the membrane. I saw tightly packed cells, readily divides. Did anyone, oh yes, one of you put lacks blood. Maddie, good. I'm just looking to see. So that's the other one as well. So in order to get, you have to be, that means you have to be fairly thin. So when we talk about physiology and function and anatomy structure, if you were too big and thick, then there's no way blood could diffuse all the way to the outer cells. So epithelium in general is really thin because it's going to get all of its nutrients through diffusion because there's no blood vessels in there. All right. And then these are all about the different shapes and sizes of it. What I want to get to is where we left off next, because that part's all extra. And that is these 2 words, the words that mean flat and it means layered. So what are the 2 words that mean to be flat and layered? So when we talk about the skin and the integumentary system, we're going to talk about the cells becoming, as they move to the surface of your skin, they're going to become flat and they're going to have distinct layers of change as the cells change size and shape. Good, Claire. Anybody else have the word for flat or scale-like? Good, Maggie, Kaya, Dorothy, Dion, Hattie, good. Emily, how you doing? Nate? Don't see anything on your whiteboard yet. I'm going to capture. Okay. So the second question that was part of this that I do want you to know, because we're going to see it in a different chapter again, is what protein is filling these cells. So these cells at the end of their life are filling with this protein that's going to provide an outer layer of waterproof protection. It's also in our nails and in our hair. So all of these things that are growing out of our epithelium all do very similar things, and so they fill with a similar protein. Good, Julia, I see yours. Janelle, Maggie, Kaya, Dion, good. I always tell a story about my youngest son who's now in his 20s, but he's here in the house, so I can't do it, about keratin when he was in 2nd grade. So he asked if the elephant's toenails were made of keratin, and the zookeeper looked at him like he was crazy. And I'm like, yes, you're right. It is keratin. You're not crazy. All right. And just a reminder, we will be doing prepared slides when we are back in person and in hybrid. So we are going to move on to the newer stuff, which is in our epithelium. Out of those are 2 major categories of glands. We have glands that are on the outside of our body secreting out that we normally think of in terms of sweat. And then we have those inside that are secreting into the blood, okay, and other body fluids. So those words for which direction secretion goes in are what words? What are the words to secrete in versus to secrete out? Good. And I looked up crin, because I've always known thought it was to mean secrete, which it is, but it's Greek. Latin, it means hair. I think it's because certain things are attached to hair follicles. They all have some sort of root that makes sense if you know Latin and Greek. So if you knew Latin and Greek, it makes these kind of things very easy. But most people don't. So exo, right, exiting out to secrete, endo going inside, and I just added a hint about why it's called that. So we're going to talk about those 3 things today. What are the 3 exocrine? Because we're really interested in the ones that are on the outside here in our skin. What is the most common type called? The kind that's only in the A regions of your body. And then the one that actually means to be oily. What are those 3 gland types? This is the last thing. We've never practiced this one before. So I see, I'm not sure. Okay, good. I see Vanessa got it. Sarah got it. Good. See Dorothy, probably think it's going to, I saw an I and a D and I'm like, oh, the K is coming. All right, Kaya. So I'm just going to talk briefly. If you don't have notes on this yet, make sure that you add them. One of the things I have students do is circle that E on the eccrine or eccrine, or you can memorize merocrine. I just think eccrine's easier to remember because the E means everywhere. So these are the ones that we normally think of as our sweat glands because they're producing the watery fluid and they're everywhere on our body. And when we can use our little microscopes and a rope, you will look for the glands on your palms that are secreting it, because we have microscopes so you could actually see the water coming out of these glands. And when you do it on the back of your hand, you can see the shiny, oily ones that are attached to your hair. So you can see how shiny they're making the back of your hand wherever there's hair. So apocrine is in the A region. So that's the ones in your armpit, your anus, and the areola tissue, the pigmented tissue around your breasts. And then holocrine, I always go with the word sebaceous, or oil. Those are the ones that are attached to your hair follicles that make everything shiny. And we'll talk more detail about why one of them's oily versus one's watery versus one that's called a milky secretion. All right. So this is the picture that kind of talks about each of them and how each of them is making a secretion of some sort and kind of why they end up being watery, oily. if you are pinching off an actual, if you look at this middle one, if you're pinching off an actual piece of the cell and the cell itself is degrading, in biology, hopefully you learned that the plasma membrane is made up of phospholipids, and lipids are fat. So you are actually secreting and breaking down a fat, an oil. So these apocrine and holocrine glands, you can see that they're disintegrating and they're releasing like an oily secretion here. Versus this is actually secreting fluids. It's not secreting pieces of cell. And these, because they're secreting pinched off portions of cells, bacteria, right, eat them. They're like, yum, you're giving me all sorts of fat. And that's what stinks, right? So if you had no bacteria on your body, you wouldn't smell on your armpits, okay? But because you have bacteria and they're feeding off those dead cells that are being released, you smell in those regions. Okay, and then you have your, again, a summary slide for you to practice. And then this is just a reminder of what I was telling you. We have these little microscopes on a rope called proscopes, and we'll be looking, this is a close-up of what you'd be seeing of the water coming out of your pores. And when you put the light on it, it warms it, makes you hot. And so suddenly it starts to release more and more sweat. So you can actually see that happening in real time when we do our labs. All right, so today though, before we do our Kahoot, we're gonna do one more learning target, which is to talk about connective tissue. Because connective tissue is the most interesting, but it's also the most complicated because they're all so different. So just make sure that you know at least 3 of these 6 characteristics. Their function is to bind, support, protect, serve as frameworks, store fat. I mean, they're all over the place because they're pretty much a catch-all for all the other types of tissue that doesn't belong in the other 3 groups. So unlike epithelial tissue, the cells are far apart. So instead of, if I took a sample of you in a connective tissue region, it would be hard. I'd be looking for cells in there. There's a lot of other stuff, and those other stuff are called extracellular matrix, they're called ground substance, and they're just other proteins. And to me, this word extracellular matrix is hard to visualize, but if you break it down, it's outside the cell, there's other things, okay? And what those other things are usually made up of are proteins. And ground substance are things like carbohydrates, okay? Most connective tissue can divide, and most have good blood supply. And like it says here, except cartilage. And I told you about the ears, and we'll talk more about that when you damage things. And so when you puncture things like your nose or your ears, just be aware, although there's blood because of the skin and epithelial tissue around that cartilage, the cartilage itself is going to have a hard time healing. The skin will, and it'll grow back over. But if you damage your cartilage in your nose or your ears, you're gonna have that hole there for a long time. So hopefully you'll still want it when you're 80. That's all I have to say. Mine never heals. All right. So now we're going to just go see what you know on the same topic, but with that Kahoot. Just because I saw what time it is. So again, this is on your stream. It is public, which means you guys can play it and practice it whenever. If you are having trouble doing it, just write your answers in the chat and I will try to read them, although they might be based on pictures of tissues. I'm trying to download. So 847-0862. Uh-oh, Alex, that's not good. Yeah, and Janelle asked a great question. Can you practice these later? Yes, you can practice these anytime. And I highly recommend practice, like if you're gonna make up a test, using one of these is that you practice it first and then come in and do your makeup for it. All right. So I have about 2 of you still. All right. We're going to start in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So tissue type that makes up the outer layers of your skin. Oops, sorry, that's right. Yes, stratified squamous, having layers and then it gets flat as it moves up is your skin. There's only 2, simple squamous and stratified squamous, that you need to know for that section. Tissue found in any voluntary muscle. Yes, adipose. Adipose is just another word for fat. This is one of the ones that eventually you'll get really good at identifying. It looks clear. It actually looks like an oil droplet, and that is characteristic of fat. So that if you see this kind of clear appearance, you're looking at fat tissue or adipose. This is one of my favorites because nothing else looks like this. Yeah, this is osseous or bone tissue. It has this distinct ring-like formation and structure, and it allows, called lamellae, and it allows it to twist and not break. Well, you hopefully don't break it, but it gives you some resistance from forces. So the way that it's built is a blood vessel down this middle part that looks dark here, and these little other dark spots are where bone cells are trapped. It's a great example of how you just have these trapped cells and everything else is other stuff that keeps your bones strong. Okay, this is bone. Yes, that was an example of normal skin right there. So even though it kind of goes up and down, that's your fingerprints, right? It's going to give you this up and down papillary layer that we'll talk about in our dermis. But the cells are changing shape, they're getting flatter, and then they're dead right out here at the top. But this is what normal skin tissue should look like. Yeah, this is skeletal muscle. We'll talk about it next week. See all these extra nuclei? It's characteristic of skeletal muscle to have multiple nuclei all along here. And that these are cells. So muscle cell and muscle fiber are the same thing. And most of us don't think of cells being shaped like this, but this is a typical skeletal muscle. So that's cardiac. And you can see it looks very similar to what we just saw, but it has these extra lines called intercalated discs. And that has to do with the electrical activity of making them all beat at once and contract at once for your heart. So you won't see those extra dark lines when you look at skeletal muscle. You'll only see them on cardiac. and they don't have nuclei everywhere. Okay? They have these kind of single nuclei. And they're also known as what are called branching cells. So they branch kind of like a V. Yes, good. Nervous. Smooth muscle is one of the hardest to distinguish from other types. It's got these funny little real flat cells, but there's so many of them, it's hard to even see that shape of that football shape. It's called fusiform. And they have single nuclei per cell. So you'll see tons of these nuclei and just tons of cells. And no stripes like the other two. It can be argued more than one way. I think it wants the muscle that's actually causing you to contract. Good. It's everywhere. I know we also talked about it being all over our body on epithelial as well. I think this means the most common versus spread throughout. I guess connective would be spread throughout too, because you have fat under that epithelium. Good. For the win. Wow, only missed one. Excellent. Oh yeah, good. Didn't miss a single one. Nice, Vanessa. Right, I'm going to save this to look at later. Not the sound. And if everyone can get back to the stream page for a minute, we're going to talk about your homeostasis lab next. And talk about specifically what should be done this Sunday versus the following Sunday. So when you get back to Google Classroom, we're going to go to the classwork tab. I want you to go find the tab that says homeostasis lab. And when you click on it, go to view assignment and instructions. So view assignment and instructions. I just want to make sure that everyone knows how to navigate and get into the actual instructions of activities. And it says, add your team's information and links here by the 18th. These are the things I want you guys to have done that I want you to work on today, right now. Number one, make sure that you have your team members' names and roles recorded on that Google slide and on a template for the lab report. So there's two documents here, one that says Google Slides, Homeostasis Lab. That's so I can kind of see all of your work at once in a gallery mode. And then individually, as a team, you have this own lab report. So Homeostasis Lab Report is a template that you're going to make a copy of today and tell me what everybody's doing in their roles, and choose colors. Like I'm going to be the red text and you're going to be the green. Number two, what I want you to get done is that your driving question. I want to be able to look at these over the weekend and make sure they're doable. So are you doing something that could be done in a week's worth of time and with the equipment and supplies that you have? Number three, some of you I know already did this because I checked off at least 5 or 6 of you on background of key terms. So you're going to pick 5 key terms or concepts that have to do with your topic and homeostasis per team member. So everyone's doing their own 5 concepts with definitions and images. So you're going to relate those and put them in your background section. I'll show you where that is in a second. And then 4, identify what you're going to manipulate and what you're going to measure, your independent and dependent. That should actually be in your question. So I can help with that if you don't understand how to make sure that both the variables are somewhere within the way you write your question. Then by the 25th, so not this Sunday, but next Sunday, we'll actually have our data collected, have it organized, start visualizing it in some graphic form, and then drawing conclusions that you can share. So if everyone could click on the Google slide first, I just want to make sure everybody knows where the roles are, because some of you had them done already and some of you did not. So that very first slide is where it says, here are some of the roles. If your group wants to change some of these roles and you all want to be physiologists and share certain things, that's fine. Just change it and tell me on your slide what each person's doing, okay? So that's where that part is. The second, so each of you are picking one of these, but one of the things I want you to notice on slide number 2 is it's hyperlinked, and that's what you'll do to get me to your personal homeostasis lab report. You'll hyperlink it there. Or you can right now find it right below in your classwork tab where it says homeostasis lab report. So there's 2 ways to get to this if you get confused and forget. But this is what I want you to do today with it, is you're going to make a copy of it. So I can see Cole and Dorothy and everybody showing up on it. You're going to go to File, make a copy, share it with your team, and put all your team member names here and what you're doing. So I'm going to be red. You're going to, Dorothy says she wants to be blue, and then next to her name put, she's going to be this person. She's going to be that person. So you're having 2 spots for this. Your Google slide, which is going to be kind of where I can go to link into all your individual work. The only parts of this that you should have done, can you guys put in your chat box or on your whiteboards, what should you have done by this week, by Sunday? And I'm going to give you time right now to do. Who can tell me? How much of this lab are you supposed to have done? I'll talk about that in just a second, Janelle. You only have to have part of the background done though. What part of the background do you have to do? Which is this section right here that says 20 points. Yes, roles and key terms. When you do a key term, what do you have to do with your key term? Besides define it. Anybody? Pictures, yes. So your brain thinks in pictures. It's really important to be able to form a picture in your mind. If you can't, your brain doesn't quite understand it yet. So you're going to have a definition, and then you go to like Google Images and you look up a picture that makes sense to you in your brain that means that concept, and paste it into this document. Okay, so I'm seeing good independent versus dependent variable, which is going to be part of that question that you're putting up here at the top. You're going to write in your question. We're not going to worry about the why or the how yet. Good. I see background info, copy template, copy roles to the team. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to be looking through these slides just to see who's on what team. And Janelle had a question. So if you aren't on a team yet, or you've been absent, you can join any team that doesn't already have 4 people. So one of the nice things I like about remote learning, there isn't this, oh no, I don't want you on my team, or I don't want her on her team, or him on my team. And because you're just going to type and say, yes, this looks like a good team. They only have 2 people, and you add your name. And that is the extent of deciding if you're on a team. Okay, so if someone joins your team and you didn't have 4 people, then figure out what roles they're going to do and how they can contribute and work together. Any questions about that? So I see so far, I'm just looking at who's, oh, I like it because it pops up and shows me where you guys are with your little, and help other people. I like it when your names have little faces and images, unless you just absolutely don't like that. Like help McKaylin get her image on there. It doesn't have to be your faces, but like Mason has an image. Yvonne has an image. I probably don't have an image. I don't have any of the fun stuff yet. Kaya does. So Kaya helped Madison, so she doesn't have to just stay in a letter M. Alex does. I'm just looking at who has images on their names, because you guys float right in different slides. I can see you working. Angela is just an A. Emily's just an E. So Jonathan, help if they're all part of your team.